Hi, my name is Kat Navarro-Lee, and I have been doing a series of interviews that I like to call Faith and Flow, where I interview people of faith and how their career in entertainment intersects with their faith. My next interview is with my friend Kirstin Pfeiffer, and I first met her because we were in the same book club where we've been reading this really great book about getting rid of your toxic thoughts. And she always had such great, wise input about her career as an actress and so much wisdom for such a young girl. She could pass for like high school, but she is also a wonderful actress. And I'm excited about our talk because she gets real about her journey with Jesus and coming out to LA, being a child actress, and thinking about purpose and wondering if this was actually her purpose when things weren't happening right away for her. I feel that her talk is just very encouraging and very real and relatable. So thanks for watching, and thanks, Kirsten, for sharing. So, hi, Kirsten. Thank you so much
Hi.
for doing this. I really wanted to interview you since we are in our book club together, and you always have so many insightful things to say. And hearing about the things that you've been working on, I wanted to just talk to you more about your faith and your journey in Hollywood and how your faith
Yeah.
has played a part in that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing, and it's always so fun to talk about this stuff. So, yeah, my journey in Hollywood, I've been acting since I was a kid. So I would say around like 12 or 13 is when I grew up on the East Coast. So I started working with an agent around that time in Philadelphia and New York, but doing mostly commercial stuff. And I grew up Christian, but I would say that I didn't really understand what it meant to have a very strong relationship with God and Jesus until I got to LA. Interestingly, because I mean,
Oh, wow.
LA is known to be a very dark place.
Mhm.
But that's actually where I met Jesus really, like, and really experienced relationship with him. So it's interesting because looking back, like I know that God was like speaking to me since I was like 6 years old about wanting to come to LA to be an actress. Like I have journals from when I was 6 that I
Mhm.
wanted to be an actress in LA. But I didn't realize at the time, like those specific God moments, you kind of look back and like as your relationship and your faith has matured, you can kind of see more clearly the way that God was working like throughout your whole life. And so it's interesting that like acting was the thing that was always like driving me out here. But now that I've gotten here, I went to school at UCLA. So that was kind of my excuse for my parents to send me across the country. But
Mhm.
I obviously wanted to be out here to pursue acting. Um, and I see like just so much purpose and like why God has me here. And it's like beyond my acting career, even just like finding the community that I found of like women and other Christians like yourself that like have really sharpened me and sharpened my faith and opened my eyes to what God is doing. It's just been like a really amazing testimony to like how God, um, sometimes like our desires, we think we know what we want, and like maybe that's part of God's plan, but He always has something greater too. And
Yeah.
so I think like the more I've gotten to understand that perspective, the easier it's been for me to deal with the really harsh realities of our industry and the rejection, because you start to understand um, that like God is directing every step of the way and like opening doors that only He can open and closing doors that only He can close. And so as an actor, like when you go out for a role that you really, really love and like you really want it and then you don't get it, like it's
Mhm.
just been a way, it's like a heartbreaking process. And everyone always asks me, and I'm sure that you've gotten this question too, like, how do you deal with all the rejection? And I think having my faith has given me peace about the rejection, because I just realized that like it's God's, what God has for me will not pass. So
Right. No, that is so beautiful that you have something solid when you're in an industry that is never quite always, it's never certain. Well, we're in uncertain times too, but having
yeah.
something that holds you solid. Can you talk
Yeah.
about when you first came out here, some of the things that you felt drew you out here, like ways that you felt God was speaking to you to move out to LA and to pursue this?
Yeah. So like I said, since I was little, I knew I wanted to be an actress in LA, but I never really thought that I could be like a professional actress. Like it was just kind of this pipe dream, right? And I did theater when I was young, but it was like when I was 12 or 13, about my mom's friend was a photographer in New York. And so she took pictures of me for her portfolio because she just needed more children for her portfolio. And I guess they turned out well because she said to my mom, like, you should really send this to an agent in Philly or New York, like Kirstin could get a lot of print work. And my parents were always very like anti-stage parents. So they were like a little skeptical, but my mom knew I really wanted it. So she was like, Kirstin, like, do you want to do this? And I was like, yes, yes, yes. I was like biting at the jump. And so I got an agent that way and started doing commercial work with them. And then they also started sending me out theatrically here and there. And I auditioned for a Disney Channel show. They were doing like a nationwide casting. So I sent in a self-tape, and the casting directors wanted me to come out here to audition in person. And now knowing what I know about the casting process, like there are so many stages you have to get through, and that's just like one in the very beginning. But like my naive 13-year-old self was like, I'm going to be a Disney star. Like this is my big break. And my parents were like, you have to wait till you're 18 to go to LA. Again, they were just always very like protective of like not wanting me to like, you know, it's a lot. If I did become a Disney star and I was 13, like you see like the burden that comes with that, and kind of the damage that can happen. And also my parents were in the middle of getting a divorce at the time, so it just didn't, they're like, we can't move the whole family out to LA. And so I was heartbroken, but I've always very much been like, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, so I'm like the achiever. Like once I set my mind to something, I'm like, I'm going to do it. So I was like, fine, I'm going to go to UCLA then, because that was like the only school I knew of in LA. And so I was like, yeah, so I was like looking up like what SAT scores I needed, what grades, and I just like worked really hard in school. And then I got in, and even when I got in, then like it was really expensive out of state tuition, and I had gotten a full ride to state schools on the East Coast. So my dad was like, well, you know, this is how much I'm contributing to your college. Like UCLA is like this much more. So this is how much we'll pay, but like the rest, like you'll have to figure out student loans. And I was like, what, like whatever, like I'll figure it out. And then I randomly got this scholarship that I didn't apply for, alumni scholarship at UCLA that they give for out-of-state students.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, and again, it's like now looking back, it was like totally a God thing that like, though, like my parents have always been really supportive, but like practical, like my dad's especially. And so once I got that, like he couldn't argue with it. And they both were like, you know, Kirstin's worked so hard. So like, yes, like you can go to LA. So that was kind of my journey to get here. And then once I was here, like I'm so grateful I did have UCLA as like an instant community to kind of assimilate me into LA. And then my sophomore year, I started going to church home with like older girls in my sorority had invited me. And so then that really just expanded my community of like Christians in LA, and started meeting and was so surprised how many people I met at church that are also in the entertainment industry, and like having that community of believers that like are in this dark industry that you can trust and can kind of like guide you. I just saw God's hand on a lot of like the ways that the people I met there and people that were mentoring me kind of led me in the right path, where it's very easy to go down the wrong path in this town. So I'm really grateful for, you know, just all of those things.
That makes such a difference, right? To have to be surrounded by community and know that you're not alone.
And like my family that was across the country was like so amazed. Like I had like when they came to visit and they came to church with me, and like just like seeing that I really do have a second family out here in the people that I've met at church, it gave them peace of mind too.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Were there ever
Yeah.
times that you felt that you had to, or maybe feeling discouraged because you felt that you would have to compromise your morals in some way to get a certain role, and just kind of how that played out?
Yeah, I mean, I would say actually more recently I noticed this because I think I'm going to backtrack for a second. Um my biggest doubt with like being an actress and like doors not opening right away, I always was like, especially as my faith was growing, I was like, is this because God doesn't want this for my life? Like, am I not walking in his will for my life?
Mhm.
And I was like so obsessed with like wanting to do what God wanted me to do that I almost like was actually doubting where he had called me to be.
Mm.
And so that's, I don't know if you ever felt that way like in this industry, because obviously it takes a while for doors to start to open naturally in this industry, and some people it can happen very quick, but it does take a while to kind of build a career here. Um so I felt like when doors weren't opening initially, I was always like, is that because God doesn't want me to be an actress? Like, is there something else I should be doing? And so I would constantly pray, like, God, if there's something else you want me to do, like, show me, show me. And like, I had nothing. Like, he didn't show me anything else. So I kept walking on this path. And as my faith has grown, I've realized that, like, if you're turning to God every day and like really seeking his voice and really seeking his will, there's no way that like our decisions, if we genuinely have a pure heart about it, like are going to be outside of his will. And even if we do make a bad decision, or like a decision that he didn't necessarily want us to, or we don't hear him correctly, like if you're still so close to God and like pursuing his purpose, he will keep you within his will, because he's greater than like any wrong turn that I can take. It's like that analogy of the GPS system where like you take a wrong turn and like it'll reroute you. So that kind of like, once I feel like God really spoke that to me very clearly in a season like a few years ago. And once I got that clarity, I realized like I need to stop doubting this, but still be yielded to if God does push me in a different direction. So that to say, once I kind of got over that hump, I would say within the last year, like doors really started opening for me in acting. And like I signed with a new manager and I was starting to get like these really big auditions that I had prayed about for so long. But with those bigger auditions and with those more abundant opportunities, there was more that I needed to be discerning of.
Mhm.
And so I remember there was a role, and this was like when I had pretty soon after I had signed with this new manager, I had an audition for a pretty big director and like a new pilot. And the role would have been like a girl in bed with another guy, and there was no nudity and there was none of that. But I just knew like in my spirit that God didn't want me to do it.
Mhm.
And so I was nervous because coming from like this scarcity mindset of like not having a bunch of auditions before that, and now like, well, if I say no to this, is there going to be more opportunity, and like I was in that scarcity mindset, and then not wanting my new manager to be mad at me and think that I'm not taking it seriously. But I just knew God was saying no, so I just told them like, this is where I feel about this. And my manager completely respected me, and I think because it was early in our relationship together, it was great because it set that boundary and they
Right.
respected it. So I think that taught me a lesson too. Like sometimes we want to be like nice and sweet and like, and for me, I'm not confrontational. I don't want to step on anyone's toes. So you like sometimes are not straightforward with those boundaries, and being forced to set that boundary early on, I saw how it actually just um, gave so much more clarity and freedom within that relationship. And
Yeah.
then right after I said that, then they got me this like the next week, like a huge audition for like a series regular for a pilot that like my dream role. Like I was crying reading the
Oh.
script. And it was just, I feel like a little nudge from God too, being like, the other role was like so tiny. It was
Mhm.
just with a big director. And then I said no to that, and like he rewarded that obedience within a week with like my dream role. And so it that was a really cool lesson to me too, and just like trusting God and that he'll open the right doors, you know, and not having that scarcity mindset.
Yeah. No, I love that. It is so important to have that mindset because it's also
Hmm.
knowing your value and knowing who you are. And
Hmm.
then when you're able to say exactly what you want to do and what you will and won't stand for, then people will respect you also. Because I know that
Right.
for different people, they'll, even with Christians, they may feel a certain way about doing certain roles, but the important thing is like sticking to what in your heart that is important to you, because it's that sense of
Hmm.
knowing who you are that I think that people will see and will draw them to want to put you in different things, because they know that you know who you are as a person, and you know what you'll
Yeah.
stand for.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of reminds me of dating where like if you are like very intentional about like what dates you go on, or like that like supply and demand, it's like if you're not making yourself available to everyone and to every role, people will like see your value more, and it'll
Definitely.
just, you
You're
know.
so right, like the whole date
Yeah.
analogy, because if you are
Yeah.
so eager to go on every single date, and
Yeah.
you'll go on a date with anybody, then people I don't know, your dating life you won't get the quality.
Yeah, it's like quality over quantity. So, but it is like it's so much easier said than done, especially I think for anyone that is starting out in this industry, um, in an industry that it's so hard to even get one door to open and to get those opportunities. And it when the opportunities start to come, like I had that experience of like feeling like I had to say yes to everything, but that's where like having my faith and realizing my God is an abundant God, and like what he has spoken, he will make it happen. And like these odds that we see as like earthly odds against us,
Yeah.
like God is greater than that. And so I think if you're not careful, like, and I definitely have had moments in my career where I like almost like idolize the gatekeepers and like the people that I need to connect with, because I put them on a pedestal, and like I was like, I need to impress them. But now in retrospect, I realize like, no, like God, I need to impress God and be faithful and obedient to him, and he will open the doors that no man can open. So,
Right. And it's so
yeah.
funny that when I listen to talks with casting directors and people who we say are the gatekeepers, they kind of say something similar where they want actors to come in and not idolize them and think that
Mhm.
they're, on this pedestal, but to come in and have something to offer. So
Yeah.
as if, they're giving them a gift. Otherwise, because they can sense that sense of like people
Mhm.
pleasingness or or
Mhm.
desperation that it's so easy to fall into uh,
Yeah.
in acting, because as performers are like, oh, we want that audience approval, but learning to
Right.
know our value, just so important.
Yeah. It's like I've heard casting directors say that before too. And getting back to the dating analogy, it's like you can sense when someone's desperate on a date and like just like saying anything that you think the other person wants to hear. And it's like, no, who are you really? Like who are you authentically? And like that's what good acting is, just
Yeah.
being authentic to the character. And so yeah, it's funny. We make it a lot more complicated than it has to be, but they're just looking for real people, you know?
Yeah, well, and I'm glad that you've discovered that early on too, because you're so young, and then being able to have that mindset to go in there and know that you have something amazing to offer, and not being like, oh, please like me.
Yeah, no, I feel very lucky. I've had so many great mentors. And I mean, all the mentors in the world, though, can't change like what God can develop in you. And I think a lot of that confidence that I've developed and that like understanding has been just through my relationship with God. So yeah, I
I
feel really
love
lucky that.
what you've talked about in terms of wondering about your purpose, because I know that there's a lot of actors and people in entertainment or even in other professions where it's difficult and you wonder if it's your purpose because things aren't exactly turning out the way that you think they are. But then I feel that it is so important when you do sit down and talk to God, and when you are thinking about like those stories, like even stories in the Bible where certain people in there, things didn't happen for them until they were very old.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I was watching a sermon this past weekend, and it was really speaking to me because it was Darius Daniels. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was talking about how when God took the people out of Egypt in Exodus,
Mhm.
um, he told them that they're going to the promised land, but he didn't tell them how they were getting there. And he could have taken them down a shorter path, but if they would have taken the shorter path, they would have they wouldn't have been prepared in the way that they were when they got to the promised land. But like if they would have known it would have been longer, they may have never left.
Mm.
Um, and they also may have never understood why they weren't prepared for some of the things that would have been along the shorter path. And so, like Darius was saying, how a lot of times we think we're ready for the front side of the blessing. Like, yeah, I'm ready to like book a series on ABC, but like we can't even fathom some of the backsides of the blessing and like some of the resistance and like even just practically speaking like internet trolls and people that are like coming
Mhm.
at you that like if you didn't have to go this long way to get to that promise in this long way like God is working out other things in your character so that when you get to that promise you will be able to hold all those things and steward it well.
Yeah.
But when we sign up for it, we don't understand sometimes how long the journey can take
Mhm.
because we probably would never go down it if we knew some of the hard things we would face.
Right.
So that I mean, he did the 45-minute sermon just did so much more justice to that story than I hope that made sense. But like that was really speaking to me too. That like just being in your purpose and it's never going to look the same way we thought it would but like for the best because there's just so many things we don't know
Yeah.
that we wouldn't be able to handle if we did know.
Right. Well, just like what you said, if you had gotten the role as a Disney star, you're not quite sure where you would be now or what your character would be like.
Mhm.
'Cause I've even heard of other actors who aren't even believers who talk about how they would be different people if they had, booked something so early on, because then
Mhm.
ego and all kinds of things are all naturally part of that journey. So it's just
Yeah.
something that you're more
Yeah.
grateful for when it takes longer sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. I
Yeah.
heard an analogy once of someone like working 10 years to save up to buy like a Porsche car and they go to buy the Porsche car and then someone else offers them the Porsche car like right then and like which one are you going to value more? The one that you worked 10 years for. Otherwise, you're just going to drive this other car that like you didn't work for. And so you might not be as careful driving it and you might get scratches on it and you might, whereas like if you are forced to go through that long journey of like
Mhm.
working for it, then you just value it and you cherish it and you steward it so much more well. So,
Yes.
yeah.
And I just love how open and honest you are about your faith, because I know that it's probably a fear that some Christians have, or some people who are, based in some kind of faith, that they don't want to talk about it, especially in
Mhm.
Hollywood, because it might affect their image or it might affect how other people see them. And so I
Mhm.
am just so thankful that that you're okay with talking about your faith so openly, and being on this platform and being open and honest about your struggles.
Thank you. Yeah. And again, I think that's like a benefit of me having to things not work out as quickly as I wanted them to, because I think early on I definitely was scared of that. Um, but like as time goes on, there's just like when your faith grows, like you just become like getting back to like knowing who you are and being confident in that.
Right.
It's just kind of like you can't help but speak that out, you know?
Yeah, I know. I've heard of. I had a friend who said that he posted something on his Instagram about his baptism or something about his walk, and then he lost followers. But then he's okay with that because then you gain other types
Hmm.
of followers who are aligned with
Right.
that kind of journey.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm just thank you so much. Be wrapping up since Zoom is going to be cutting me off soon, but
Yeah.
really enjoyed our talk, and then I'll be posting, links on how people can follow your work.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. And
Yeah.
I love that you're doing this and like creating this platform for people. I know that a lot of people are going to be helped out just by like all the videos you're posting. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kristen, and I will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.